Larry Fink, BlackRock CEO, one of the largest investment firms in the world, handling literally trillions of dollars worth of assets, have come out to say that he is ashamed to be a part of the ESG political debate. Well, on the bright side, Larry, don't worry about it, because there's not a lot of political debate going on here. We have quite conclusively come down on one side of this argument, namely that ESG sucks awfully, and should be banned wherever possible, as now I think 2 states in the US has already moved towards doing, or at the very least highly restricting, ESG business in their local communities and their spheres of government. Because of ESG, of course, means environmental social governance, and its entire point and purpose is to push as is in the name, socialist ideology via vast quantities of cash and investment in what they perceive to be the correct social goals and objectives. ESG money has been one of the largest causes for, well, the absolute garbage entertainment that we've all been suffering through the last decade or so, as many companies like Disney, for example, haven't actually had to earn money by selling you a product you would like to purchase, but rather making a product that investors will be willing to pour millions and billions of dollars into. ESG can really be seen as the root of much of our current day malaise, and the fact that some of the people who pushed for it the most are now looking at it and I don't know about that. That's starting to have an awfully negative sound to it. Is a very, 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 very good thing indeed. As we have, of course, been talking about quite frequently over the last few weeks and months, that the ESG money is drying up. And so a lot of the companies that bet all of their business model on that money is suddenly looking at flop after flop after flop and going, well, shit, if we can't trick people into giving us money for free anymore, we might actually have to make a product that people want again. Bud Light is a recent victim of this, as they tried to push a little bit too hard for the ESG money and received the full-on face-full backlash they so thoroughly deserved. So, this is a very nice little summing up article right here. Why it matters. The world's largest asset manager frames its investment approach as a leading indicator for the market. BlackRock manages $9.2 trillion. And when they are starting to get cold feet, you know that everyone else is going to do so as well. Fink's latest statement is sure to generate plenty of controversy, absolutely, as he was one of the leading figures of ESG. And this also talks about the backstory. BlackRock's bullish, optimistic, outlook on responsible environment, social and government investing is being blasted by conservatives as woke capitalism and has drawn boycotts from Florida and Texas. Fink has been a major proponent of factoring in climate change risks to investing strategies and corporate leadership. So, the absolute steelman position of ESG, the most charitable interpretation imaginable, is that it is supposed to be an investment form that scores companies on how well they are able to survive the future, shall we say. This takes into consideration how good they are at resisting cancellation attempts from the only force that has been launching them pretty much throughout our entire recent history, with the current one and singular exception of Bud Light, and to a degree, Target it seems to be, and also how it can handle climate change, which is of course a key pillar of the cathedral that is woke, so they have to take that into consideration as well. Again, if we give them the most charitable interpretation possible, and we go like, okay, climate change is real, it's happening, we know exactly what's going to happen, it's going to make this and this more expensive, this and this more difficult, etc. How do we future-proof our companies for that? Alright, fair enough. But the problem is, this basically all hinges on getting the money to do that future-proofing from somewhere, and this is where BlackRock comes in. Essentially, BlackRock is going to go, okay, the ocean is going to rise up and swallow us all in 5 years. For the 3rd time, presumably. And therefore, you have to invest heavily in businesses that float. Yeah, pulling an example out of my ass here, but you get the general gist of it. So how do you make a business float? Well, you're going to need an absolute assload of money, which you will get via investment firms, who will then again go to their investors and go, okay. We know this is hella expensive, but it'll future-proof the business, meaning that you might not see any money now or next year or the year after or ever in reality, but you'll totally see it eventually. And they can also argue that a bunch of the cost will be offset by various government investment. In fact, I believe there was a BlackRock investor letter recording thingity-bob where Fink himself explained that one of the main reasons why they were going into this field was because there was a lot of free governmental money to be gained. As governments around the world invest in ever more ambitious, that's the nice word. Foolish might be the more correct term, however. Environmental, I was looking for. English is difficult occasionally. Social programs. For example, Norway has put enormous quantities of money into renewable energy, which is hilarious considering Norway, of course, could get pretty much all the renewable energy it wanted if it simply created more, water hydroelectric plants, as we are a country filled with waterfalls. But since those ruined the environment, we can't do those. What about windmills? Okay, we can build windmills. God dash. We can't do that either, because you see, the Sami is afraid that their reindeer will be frightened by the windmills. I don't know how, but apparently reindeers look at windmills and just go like, ooh, Satan, and stop eating or something. Nobody's really been quite able to explain why the reindeer are going to be inconvenienced by the windmill, but we'll take it on their authority that they totally will. The problem with this is that every investment the government seems to make will then immediately be screwed over again. Germany, famously, for example, committed to an enormous de-escalation of their own power production via coal and nuclear energy, only for the whole Russia thing to happen and Germany going, I guess we'll freeze to death. Luckily, the Russians never actually turned off the tap because they needed money as well, but it kind of illustrated the danger of relying on the natural gas resources of one of your main geopolitical enemies in the region. And now Germany is desperately trying to restart it. France went the other way and is now being in a bit of a dominant position in the energy market. And essentially, the whole idea of renewable energy, it just isn't working right now. It tends to be far more expensive to produce the energy than the investment that you put into it. It costs more to do it than what you get out. Now, that is an inevitable thing of the development. You are going to have to put a lot of money in before you will eventually see the things coming out, and the only people capable of doing this is either A, the governments themselves, or B, the old energy companies, which is why we should continue working on oil resources, because the big oil businesses are the only ones capable of actually paying for the ludicrously expensive development of green and renewable energy. This is again where BlackRock comes in. They attempted to push the idea of ESG via this, which in a far more realistic sense is a far left ideological position, rewarding companies for fulfilling the ESG scores, which includes a ton of scores on wokeness and diversity. It requires companies to, of course, hire based on skin color, as this is one of the ways in which they will future-proof themselves. For you see, powerful companies come from diverse opinions, and by diverse opinions we mean skin colors, of course. This has really proven to be actually true, mind you, but details. He also went on to say that he is not going to use the word ESG because it's been misused by the far left and the far right. So one of the main reasons why Larry is abandoning the term ESG is because it has gained too much in the way of a negative connotation. It is now a term that most people will hear and automatically reject for being what it is, a far left racist ideology. He is then going to try and rebrand it into conscientious capitalism, because he can't simply abandon it entirely either, bearing in mind how much money they had invested in it. But I suspect this might be more of a verbal feint, more so than an actual commitment to the overall idea, as the companies that he's working with is of course not abandoning ESG. In fact, the Witcher producer, CD Projekt Red, just a few months ago said that they were doubling down on ESG. A bit late to the party there, CD Projekt, but I'm sure you're used to that at this point, so congrats. And you can also say that it is the old saying, isn't it? No matter how much you polish a turd, it will remain a turd. And conscientious capitalism, well, it's not a very good word. In fact, it is a bit of a contradiction in term, as capitalism is supposed to be rather abusive. That is the point of capitalism, to get as much money for your investors as possible, and then we as the people, and in turn the government, will go, okay, that's fine, but you don't get to do this. Like, oh, but we would like to dump our poisonous chemicals in the river because it's cheap. Yeah, but no, we're going to put in place regulations on that. Capitalism is a beast that must be harnessed, it must be tamed, it must be used for the greatest good imaginable, but it must be done so by the people, not the investors and the people at the top themselves, because what you will have then is simply the rule of the top 1%, something we've already got a little bit too much of, frankly. The very fact, though, that they are being forced to, well, leave the term behind and mention that it is being misused by the far left as well speaks volumes as to the degradation of the brand and just how damaging it has become to these big money men, and how in turn reluctant English they will be to rely upon it in the future. If a company like Disney, for example, comes to BlackRock now and goes, hey, look at how good our ESG score is, they're far more likely to get a bap on the head rather than another sack of cash, which will force the entire industry to reinvent itself along, hopefully, more actually capitalist and conservative lines. Now, bear in mind, we are going to have to wait and see whether or not the sheep truly has changed its colours or whether or not it is still pitch black, but it is a step in the right direction, and it is simply yet one more of the many heartening signs that we are seeing every day now that the tide has finally turned, as when the money men begin aligning behind us as well, the culture is soon to follow. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.